At the family reunion, Anita told me that while I was talking about my story about coming back to the church, that she had a strong feeling that Irma had been helping on the other side get me back. I told my mom and grandma on the way home from when we went to go see the Saratoga Springs open house that I think Irma and Grandpa were working together.
Thanks for reporting that.
Grandpa Bernie.
Yeah. I forget he's not grandpa to everybody. Just me and Hannah.
All right, Ken, I think it's your turn.
We were talking about reporting into our mother when we got home. There was a rule, I didn't know that it didn't apply to everyone, but when I got home from an activity, I went to the bedroom and she slept closer to the door than my father, and I had to tell her I was home, and I had to wake her up enough that she would respond to know I was. That was a rule we had. So you want me to say any more, or should we do it another time?
If you can think of anything else, why do it now?
I got Moses stuff.
Yeah, let's hear more then.
Okay. When my mother would cook something, we would eat it. She did the best she could with the food she had. We ate a lot of potatoes, we ate a lot of other things. This was in Marion that we had grown. We grew carrots and potatoes and turnips and stuff. But when we got in Idaho, our family kind of turned upside down because Father decided, after he'd been in the Jackson house a little bit, he was going to go build him a house west of the creek there where we stacked the hay in, build it into the hill, and he was going to have his water come up right in this center of the house so it wouldn't freeze. He'd had enough of frozen water in the winter. Well, I think you all know the story that when they bought the place in Idaho, they were concerned about the water rights. So my father went to Idaho Falls to the Department of Water Resources and verified that we had so much water decreed to our place. What they did not tell him, and which is not the case in Utah, is that prior right, the prior right doctrine, first in time, first in right. So if there's not enough water in the creek or stream, whatever, to satisfy everybody, the most recent filing is the one that gets shut off first. And that's why our situation in Idaho. So that first summer was a dry summer, and here come, I guess it was in June, and the water master says you've got to turn your water down. And Paul and John didn't understand that.
Plus they went and asked the neighbors, Tom Harper, and I don't know all who they asked. And they said, oh yeah, nobody can touch that water. That's yours.
And so that was the thing that started my father into a depression. And he battled it and he coped with it. And he was depressed and it was hard on him. But finally he decided, I am not going to be depressed. So in his mind he decided, I'm going to be positive. And he stopped being depressed and he was positive and did the best he could with everything, and we came within a gnat's hair of losing that place. And it's only by the grace of our Heavenly Father that we were able to keep it. So this neighbor that lived kitty-cornered from us, Harper, he was one of the people that told our Pa and John that we had the water belonged to us. And when we found out we didn't, they went to him and said, why did you tell us that? And he says, well, I didn't know you, but I knew the man that was living here. I knew him. What a poor excuse, but that was a fact. Okay, but this Tom Harper became a good neighbor, good friends. He was living with his third wife, and he had just a few cows. He didn't have a good water right himself. He had 160 acres, that's the Harper place there, and just a few cows, but he had quite a few chickens. And he raised chickens for eggs, and he slaughtered chickens, and he would slaughter chickens for other people. And so he bought himself a plucker. But when they had to process a lot of chickens, why, he and his wife couldn't handle it all, and they would ask my mother to come over and help them, and sometimes Margie. And in the process of helping Harper's process these chickens, why, Sister Harper told Mom about a nice chicken recipe. And so Mom got the recipe down either on paper or in her mind, and she applied it one supper meal in the evening. When we sat down to supper, why, there was this bowl of breaded something or other, but there was some chicken feet sticking right up out of it, with the claws even on. And my mother said she'd dish some up for herself, and it was all there for us. And it was my father, my mother, me, and you were there. Were you there?
I don't remember it. I don't know.
You were not there, but you were.
I sure was.
I think there may have been just the four of us. There was hardly, I don't think there was a word said. I don't remember a word being said. My father never touched it. I couldn't stomach it. I didn't touch it. I don't know about Jim.
No.
But my mother did some of the thickening up and put on her plate, and then got a chicken foot put on her plate. Ate, and she chewed the skin off of that chicken foot, and nothing was said. Nothing. But she never ever served it again, never.
So let me tell you something. I'd heard about that, and on my mission, a really nice Chinese lady, I think she was a teacher at a college, invited me and my companion out to dinner, Chinese restaurant, and she ordered chicken foot soup. And I watched her. She'd take a scoop of that, put those chicken feet in her mouth, and go, and then spit out the bones. And she just,
It was all bones, but no, those skin on it. Right, those scaly scales, not skin,
yeah.
Scales on the feet.
Yeah, I think she ate the scales from the chicken feet, but I thought about Mom and Sister Harper. Luckily, I didn't order that dish.
So I'm going to tell you about living in the Jackson house, and this pertains to Louise and what happened to her, so she can correct what I say. A ring was found that looked like a diamond engagement ring there, and I don't know who found it, but it was in underneath the stairs, I think. So Louise had possession of it, and we wondered about it, and so they took it. I don't know who took it to Pocatello to have it analyzed to see if it was glass or real. And whoever analyzed it says, "Oh, that's glass. That's just a fake ring, glass." So Louise took it on her mission with her, and when their apartment was broke into her, that's one of the things that was stolen, was that ring. So some years later, not too many years later, Doug was taking a English class over at the high school from a woman who had lived in that house. And when she found out that Doug lived in that house, she said, "Oh, I lost my engagement ring in that house and I never did find it." So did her boyfriend give her a fake ring, or did the person who analyzed it make a mistake? Do you have anything to add to that?
You told it got stolen when I was on my mission.
So we won't know in this life what, but if it's important to any of you, you can find it out in the next life. So you seem to be more awake than you were a little bit ago. So I'm gonna go a little bit more. So there was a tradition in women's homes at the time I was growing up to have spring house cleaning. Every spring, the women folk would clean the house. They would start in one room, and they would take everything out of it and clean. A thorough cleaning of that room. It may take weeks to clean the house. And then they'd go to another room. They did it every year. So every year, Mom would clean, and she would take the rugs and put them on the clothesline out in the yard. And one of the things we kids had to do was beat the dust out of the rugs with a rug beater, which was it had a handle wooden handle about that long round, and then there was a twisted piece of wire in a shape like that, like an egg, and you just beat that rug and the dust would come out of it, and beat it until there was no more dust, and you'd had the rug clean. But I don't know where those rugs were in the house, maybe in the bedroom, I don't know. But in the living room, when I got to be in high school, I got quite vain, so to speak. And I was embarrassed about our standard of living in our house compared to my friends, because we had a rug in the center of the living room, but it was not much of a rug. And we did not have hardwood floors in that house. The flooring was pine.
That rug he's talking about was threadbare. Edith used to sweep it. We didn't have a vacuum. She'd sweep it, but the threads were actually riding on top of the...
So I talked to my mother about it and told her that I was embarrassed to have people come to our house. And she said, well, I know, I understand, but we just don't have money for a carpet in there. And I said, okay, Mom, this is what I'll do. I had gone to the stock show with a lamb in FFA and had reserve champion lamb in Ogden, Utah, which was a pretty big stock show. And I'd gotten an $80 check for that lamb, and I said, I'll give you this $80 and you buy a rug. So she did. And it didn't cover the whole floor, it wasn't a carpet, but it was respectable. So that's something that happened. So I want to talk about the difference in our childhood growing up and now. I've lived with grandchildren, and it's hard for me. It's hard because, like I told your brother Joseph, we were going to have a family telephone call, and he wanted me to say some things, and I said, well, yeah, I'll say some things, all right. I'll tell you the 10 reasons that this generation of kids is going to hell. And Colleen says, no, you're not. You're not going to do that. So, do you remember the conversation we had following that, any of you? I know some of you are on that conversation, so I watered it down, and I didn't tell the truth. But those 10 conditions or more, 20 or more, still exist. They're still right there. One of them is, and it's universal, it's in society. And the things that have caused it are TV, not so much cell phones, because it started before we had access to cell phones, because the standard of living, TV is the big thing. Most cartoons that kids see now, isn't the characters in them animated? Most are animated. Well, oh yeah, the cartoons are all animated, aren't they? The characters don't talk in a normal tone. They talk in a high-pitched, kind of a yelling tone. And I don't know if that's on purpose to bring evil and bad influence into this generation of children, or if it's a byproduct of what they feel is necessary. But you notice in nearly every program is a high-pitched thing, and there's control for power. There's a feeling of wanting to be the top dog, to be better, to win. And kids nowadays, when they're with family or in public, they want to show off. They want attention on them. It's me, me, me. And their toys, they don't share toys like we did. We got time for me to finish this? It won't take too long. What do you say, Ruth?
Yep.
Okay, this is an example, and I've run it through Jim and Doug and Louise, and as I tell it now, if I vary from what I've told them before, they can correct it, and I want them to. I want it to be accurate. This is how we were as a family. When we went to visit anyone, whether it be an aunt and uncle or a neighbor in the community, and we were invited to go, which we were oft times, we would knock on the door, and the people would come to the door and invite us in. And whoever was there, my mother and father, and whatever children were there, we would go in, and we would be invited to sit down wherever. Okay, then the conversation would start between the grown-ups, and we children sat there and listened. We didn't say anything. It didn't matter how many kids they had. We did not say anything. We sat there. We didn't ask for a drink of water. We did not jump up and say, I need to go to the bathroom. We sat there and listened. Now, the woman of the house, who, if she had kids, was aware of our uncomfortable circumstance. So she may invite us to go outside and play with her kids. And if she invited us, we did. Otherwise, we didn't leave our seat. Okay, so if we went outside and the kid had a tricycle, we did not jump on the tricycle and ride it. We did not, unless we were invited. It was their property. We did not encroach on their property, their toys, their things. We did not do it unless we were invited. And we were obedient. We were civil.
That was due to your training or just common sense and tuition?
Two or three things, Sean. One was the situation in the society. We had just come through the Depression. The Depression had killed a lot of people died from the Depression. I don't know if they starved to death or they died from I don't know. But that was a tough time. I was born in 1935 in the Depression. The height of it was in 29. So we're just coming out of that Depression. We did not have TV, so we didn't have that wretched, evil influence of that's on there most every program now. And our parents grew up with the civil society where kids were obedient. I'll even tell you, my father said, it used to be said, this was him saying to me, it used to be said that kids were to be seen and not heard. Imagine that. Imagine that being the prevalent feeling in society. Okay, now he didn't apply that to us 100%, but there was that pervasive. Kids were not, you never interrupted adults when they're talking, never, no matter what you wanted. If your parents were talking to somebody, you never interrupted them. Okay, we had some basic toys in the house. It was so easy. It was so easy to keep the house clean. When I came from school, my bedroom was downstairs. I wore my school clothes, went downstairs, and I picked up my work clothes that were hanging on the bedpost, a shirt and a pair of pants. I laid them on the bed, took my school clothes off, put my pants on the bedpost, my shirt on top of it. The next week, we wore a clean set each week. At the end of the week, then I put those in the dirty clothes, which was a 50-gallon barrel, and I went past going upstairs, was in the fruit room. Okay, and each of us had a drawer in the dresser. That's where we kept our underclothing and our socks and the clean clothes for the next week. There was a closet where we kept our Sunday clothes. That's all, so we didn't, and our socks was in the drawer of the dresser. We each had a drawer. So we didn't have 15 pairs of shoes and 35 pair of socks scattered all over creation in the house. And we knew where everything we owned was, every piece of particle of clothing, we knew where it was. In the kitchen, on the south wall, about 6 feet high, was a board nailed to the wall with hooks in it. That's where the coats of the adults hung. Underneath that was another board with hooks, and that's where the kids' coats hung. The overshoes were kept on the porch unless they needed to be warm, and then you put a newspaper down and put them under the kids' clothes. Okay, we did not have a problem with keeping the toys cleaned up because
We didn't have
each kid might have had 1 or 2 toys, and it was so special to them that they put it away, kept it in their drawer in their bedroom or some special place. There was not any toys to be scattered around, except we had, as I recall, we had 5 games. We had Chinese checkers, we had crokinole, fiddlesticks. That's it, isn't it?
We had a game, did you say checkers?
I said checkers and Chinese checkers.
We had
Fiddlesticks and crokinole.
some kind of a board game at one time, I can't remember now what it
Well,
was.
Chinese
Pollyanna.
checkers was that.
Pollyanna.
Yeah, but we had Pollyanna.
No, that was after I grew up.
Okay.
That Pollyanna was a recent thing I didn't know anything
It was
about.
for the younger kids.
Okay. And
I gotta take off.
Oh, was. Sorry you gotta leave.
Sorry
too.
we bored you to tears till you left.
See ya, Willis. Thank
Go
you.
watch the YouTube of it.
So everything was everything was picked up. So there were no balls in the family except when I was in the 8th grade. I got a basketball for Christmas because I wanted one so bad. And then we had a little softball. It was all spongy, and I made a bat out of a lathe at school, and that was our bat. And we had an old mitt, and then we had a tether ball, which was a tennis ball in a sack tied to a rope, tied to the thing. And you know what tether ball is. That's the extent of our sporting goods, except we had some ice skates that we would skate with. So there was no, if we got a toy, we've got checkers or fiddlesticks are out, then when we were done with them, we picked them up and put them in their container and put them back. Oh, we had rook cards.
And
Like-
pit.
And pit. Well, we had 2 sets of cards. Well, we were some. So, but they were never out, never. When we were done, the one who got them out put them away. And when I went back to our house in Marion, and some of you were there and saw the size of that house, I can't believe that many people lived in that house. Because there was 10 children and 2 adults, that's 12. But Norman, when he was 12, went to live with Grandpa Winterton because he asked Mom if he could come out there, and she said, I don't want to let him go until he's 12. So from the time he was 12 on, then he lived with Grandpa Winterton. And then Irma was in college for a while and then got married. But so there was a lot of the times there was 11 of us in that house. We ate most of our meals together. I think I told you at the reunion you didn't need to worry about leftovers because there weren't any. When you ate the food, you were concerned about taking more than your share and if there'd be enough of the rest. Anything else?
My mom said that she couldn't understand mothers that were always worried about trying to get their children to eat. She said her problem was trying to find enough to feed them. But I remember our cousin Alan Bassard came to stay with us. My mother had a sister named Laura, and she had 3 children, and her oldest was Alan, and then there was Karen, there was Jan, and then Karen, and Alan was my age, so I don't remember this, but Margie told me that Aunt Laura was always fussing, oh, eat this, oh, be careful, oh, eat this, oh, you need to eat, oh, and so for some reason my Aunt Laura left Alan with us while she went away for 2 or 3 days, and so Margie said that they set Alan up to the table, and I don't like this and I don't want that. No, nobody paid any attention, so the next meal, and nobody paid any attention, and the next meal she said he scarfed down everything inside. but there were no goodies in between, you know. Nowadays, if the kids don't want what you cook, they just graze and eat junk all day.
Alan's father was a lawyer and became a judge, and he was down in Richfield a good part of my growing up. And Aunt Laura had dated Jack Dempsey, the boxer. She'd gone on a date with him.
And Aunt Laura and Uncle Sterling were friends with Gordon B. Hinckley and Marjorie. And Marjorie talked to me about that when I was on my mission in Taiwan, and they were over visiting.
She talked to you about the
They
mutual
were
friends?
friends with Aunt Laura and Uncle Sterling.
I have 2 memories about food. I remember when I was a teenager, we were given a whole banana to eat, and I thought, a whole banana, I don't have to share any of it, I can eat the whole thing. I remember being in the hospital when I was young with polio. I was there about a week, and I have 3 memories. One of them was they brought a glass of orange juice, and I thought, this whole thing is for me. And I tasted it, and it was so strong, it wasn't watered down. It was it took me a while to take it because it was so strong and didn't have so much water in it. And I thought, my golly, this hospital is not this bad. Here we get a whole glass of orange juice, and I can drink it as much as I want, and it doesn't taste like water.
And I told you at the reunion, none of us ever went hungry. We always had food. And I only remember on one occasion we didn't have enough money for school lunch. Something about my father, he always wore work shirts that had the button-down pockets, and he always had some money bills in his pocket.
I didn't know that.
Surely you do.
I didn't remember that.
You Doug and Jim, you remember that, don't you?
I don't.
Do you, Jim?
No. I knew
Maybe he
had
hid them from us.
I knew he had a pencil about that long, and every few days he'd get out a stick and whittle it smooth and take his pencil and figure out how much money we were gonna make, and it was always 3 to 10 times more than we actually did make.
It was alluded to earlier about we were kind of ingrained that we could not reach the celestial kingdom unless we stayed on the farm and farmed as a family group together. I was never told that consciously, but it was a pervading feeling. Did you guys all feel that?
Yes.
I sensed that too, but the women were not subject to the same rule, because if they married and their husband didn't want to stay, then they were pardoned.
Did you feel that, Jim?
Mm-hmm.
Did any of your relatives have the same sense, or Uncle Joseph and his family feel something like that, or was it just something?
I
Unique
don't
to your dad.
think they did. I don't think they did so much, no.
So one
So-
time I said to Pa, so he asked me and Bernie if we wanted to be part of the family, I don't know what term, but, and Bernie didn't, and Pa was kind of disappointed, and I said to Pa, how come you're set on having a whole family all together? And he said, well, how would you like it if you had Lisa growing up with you, and instead of staying with you and the family, she went off with the Mariotti.
So Jim is exactly right. When Paul would get in a certain mood, and he had this pencil, he had a K-bar red-handled pocket knife that I thought was the nicest knife I'd ever seen. And he had it all his life until later in life he lost it, and I don't know where. But it was always really sharp, had really good steel. So he'd get this pencil that was this long out of his pocket, and he would make sure that it was sharp enough to get right. And he would get a stick, it had to be at least that wide and at least that long, and he'd whittle one side till he could write on it with a pencil. He'd say, now how much money can we make as a family? This is in Marion and particularly in Idaho. He said if we run this, okay, I'll give you the Idaho example. If we run 600 sheep, which we ran when we first got there, 600 sheep, and the lambs, you get a certain percent, they're worth so much money in the spring when they're higher, and he'd write that down. And was it 40 milk cows he was gonna have, or 60, or whatever number? How much will a cow produce? How many pounds of milk? And you'd tell him, and so he'd times that, and he'd write that down. And then there'd be some beef cattle, and he'd write that down, and he'd add it up, and it was a lot of money. I mean, it was a lot of money. So I would think, well, why aren't we doing this? So why don't we do this? So this morning I asked Louise and Doug and Jim all, in our upbringing, is there anything that you would change? There's something that I would change, and I don't know if it would have been better for us or worse for us, but I would change it. Unless you're really bored, I'm gonna tell you.
We're here to listen.
Okay. We ran the sheep above the place, and
Is this Marion or Idaho?
this is in Marion, above the place, and they were usually about a mile to a mile and a half from the house. And you had to keep the rams out of them until you wanted the rams in to have the lambs come at a certain date. We didn't have good facilities, so the lambs were supposed to come after the weather moderated in April and May. So in order to keep the rams, so they wouldn't get with the sheep, why, we'd keep them in the corral and feed them hay. Nice, green, lush hay out of the barn. And we'd feed them that way for a week or two, and Pa would say, oh, I just can't, I don't have the heart to keep feeding this good hay to these bucks. We can turn them out in the pasture, the quack grass, which was directly south of the house. It had a fence around it. So we'd turn them out there, in 2 or 3 days, the bucks could either hear or smell the ewes, and they'd get through the fence, be gone. and we might be haying or something, and it'd be 2 or 3 days or a week before we could get the ewes killed and get the curses out. So almost every year, we would have these lambs born in February and March, half of the herd or a third of the herd, and we had no facilities except a open shed, and we would lose a whole bunch of them, a whole bunch. So if I would have changed, looking back, if I would have changed anything, I would have had my father transfer some of his dreams, his ideals, to reality. If we would, I think this, I don't know if I'm right. I think this, maybe these folks can have a better idea of reality. But I think if we would have really tried, we could have found some net fencing around and fenced our place better so that our bucks didn't get out, or keep the curses in and feed them hay. And we could have fenced, put that net wire on the fence between us and Otis Peterson and Marv Simpson and Wellers, so that we didn't have our sheep in their place all the time in the spring. Some of us would have to stay out of school and herd the sheep or haul rocks. And my father, he would watch the lamb market, and Idaho spring lambs were at their peak in July, June or July, and they'd say the weight, the 125 pounds, they brought X dollars per pound, and my father would dream of that. Why? We could have done that. We could have, if we'd have done some more fencing, if we'd have built a shed and lambed like people do over in Rupert and real sheep men. We wouldn't need as big a shed as them, but we could have done, I think, because we had enough help with Margie. She was as good a help outside as a man, better at handling livestock. I think we could have, but so I wished. That's one thing I would have changed. That's about the only thing, though. And maybe that would have given us more money, and we turned out worse. We'd have bought motorcycles maybe and got killed, or
Maybe a carpet that fit.
yeah, we probably would have gone to hell.
The bucks got out and it kept you.
Bucks
Worthy
got
of
out
heaven.
and saved your souls.
Yeah, and when these lambs would come in the winter and we'd lose so many, my father would say, "This will never happen again. This will never happen. We'll keep those bucks locked up. No matter what, this will never happen again." Next year it did.
Luana told me that she thinks maybe it was a huge blessing that her dad lost the property so that she and her siblings didn't have to fight over it.
Now, Jim, you haven't said very much, but I know you've got a lot of experience, a lot on your mind. I wish you'd get it.
I think you're bored to tears. I don't want to say anymore.
I know it's
Well,
more than tears.
let's ask them individually.
Do you
Hannah,
like his answer?
John,
I understand it, but I wish you'd say more.
Ruth. Yeah,
I'm not
think-
bored.
Yeah, I think Jim might not feel like saying it now, but it'll all be put out
There
sometime.
may not be a better time to get it recorded than Jim's doing now.
I just don't have that much to say unless there's something you want to know. I just don't.
Well, I'll say something while you think about it then. Doug was saying when he was telling about him and his siblings, he said that Jim had more energy or ambition or something. So my observation with Jim when he was little, from the very youngest age, he was always willing to work. He would come home from school, change his clothes, and go to work. Now my memory is that in Marion, we'd come home from school and Harold and Ken would fritter around, and Mom would say, now change your clothes and go to work. And eventually they did, but she never told Jim go to work. He went to work. But when we were in Idaho one summer, when I was home for summer from BYU while we were digging burrs, and Mom and Pop, and sometimes you were with us somewhere, weren't you? And,
Some, but not regularly.
and me and Doug and Jim would go out and dig burrs.
And sometimes Edith.
Huh?
Sometimes Edith.
Oh, yeah. But Doug sometimes was, well, I don't remember if this was related to digging burrs, but anyway, Doug and I were doing something and he was kind of walking slow, and I said, Doug, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, oh, I don't know. I said, well, you just want to be a hobo? And he said, no, they have to walk too much.
There's something that's come to my mind. I've heard Doug tell it before, but I think it should be recorded. When we got to Idaho, when we lived in Marion, as I said at the reunion, I think our standard of living was just a little bit lower than average, but we had a nice, comfortable house, and we were able to do things we wanted, and not everything, but and we were very respected. Like has been said, Pa was an honest man, and he was a hard worker, and he gained the respect of everybody. And he was a very, very good horseman. He was always on the short end of a horse trade because he was so gullible. And he believed the shysters that were horse traders in the valley. So when we got to Idaho, and we found out that first summer that we only had water when you didn't need it, why it just turned everything, our lives, upside down. So Doug had to come through that as a teenager. Now I had already been on my mission and was in college, and I was there some, but I couldn't stand it. I'm going to share this with you, and then I want Doug to share this. I was so depressed from being there with our situation. It seemed like there was no way out, and there was a way out but it just, everything went wrong. Everything went wrong. I couldn't stand it. We were looked down. I thought we were looked down on by the people in church as being kind of second-class people. When we first got there, Pa was mowing a field of hay with the horses. A lot of those people had their first tractor. But the word got around the community. Who are those people on that Monroe place? Are they Basque, or what are they? They do their work with horses, and they have sheep. And when we would go to church, I felt like there was only 3 or 4 people there that really accepted us, and the rest looked down on us. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but I perceived it, and I could tell you why I perceived it, but I'm not going to. So it was very uncomfortable to me to be there. I was out of college now, and both before and after my Army experience of 2 years. So there was pressure on me to stay if I wanted to go to the Celestial Kingdom. But it was terribly uncomfortable for me. So when the opportunity came for me to, my cousin Roscoe broke his hip and asked me to come down and help for a while his hip improved. And then Deloy Winterton, who was Mom's brother-in-law, needed a hernia operation, and they wanted me to come down and do the chores while he got this hernia operation. I stayed a year and a half there, and then I had an opportunity to cut timber. So while I was cutting timber down there, I got season tickets at BYU football games. I'd come out of the mountains east of Camas, and they come down and go to the football games, and this homecoming occasion, I went to the homecoming parade, and I was standing on University Avenue on the west side of the street, and here come the parade up going from south to north on University Avenue. The bands were playing and everything, and the floats and everything, and here came this band from Idaho, from Pocatello, Idaho, and as it came marching up toward me, this black feeling of depression enveloped me like somebody was putting a dark blanket over me. I just felt depressed. The feeling of depression came over me because it reminded me of Idaho. And as they went past, the farther they got away from me, more the depression lifted off. That's the situation I was in. And everybody that was there on that place in Idaho left except Jim. Vernon Erickson was there. He left. Harold was there. He left. I left. Doug left. That's it, isn't it?
Roy and Clint. And
No, they didn't leave. Well, Clint did, but that was after. Clint did leave. Roy didn't. But Jim did not leave. He didn't have a wife to influence him, and not that our wives influenced us, but Jim stayed there and was loyal to him. Okay, so growing up, Doug got to be dating age, and we lived in that Jackson house, and everybody knew. The bus went past it every day, picked him up. So it was terribly hard on Doug. So he's shared with us, and I want him to share with you and have it recorded. His feelings and his experience about it. And if he doesn't tell the parts I want him to tell, I'm gonna remind him. Tell us about the Teeples girl and the bus and the whole thing, Doug.
So let me ask real quick. So were you second-class citizens mostly because you lost the water, and so that made you lose crops and livestock and stuff, and then you were just really poor?
We couldn't grow the hay and grain to feed them.
So
but what made you a second-class citizen? Too poor?
I'll add something to that.
So did you have to get rid of livestock because you couldn't feed them?
We had to cut down a lot.
Okay.
We eventually sold the sheep, but
It wasn't because of that. The coyotes were bad, and we lost 200 head.
and then I left. See, I left, and before Doug herded them up on the section, I herded them. I even took my furlough in the Army for the month of they should be out there, and I came home and herded the sheep on my military furlough. So okay, so that was the situation we were in. So I want Doug to relate stuff that he used to relate to us about his experience growing up there, his social experience.
Two or three things I'll relate to you. Part of the reason we didn't have money, and we were living in that little shack, but part of it was my father was used to farming with horses, and the farmers around had tractors, and we had a thrashing machine and a binder, and everybody else had combine, and so there was a combination of that.
The thrashing machine was Harold's.
But yeah, but we used it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember once after school, we had the binder had got the grain and what was the
Stock,
Bundle.
shafts?
bundles anyway, and my mother and I were out after school loading them on a wagon, and a man came by from Europe, and saw that, and he stopped and wanted pictures of that. He could not believe he was seeing this in the United States. He just took picture after picture of my mother with the horses there and me throwing.
Like the old country, huh?
Yeah, he could not believe he had seen this in the United States, and he wanted a picture of that. I remember that. I remember going to school one morning, and a boy came up to me. I think he was my age. He came up to me. I was getting in my locker, and he said, I thought he said, "Was your aunt's sister from Italy?" And I said, "My aunt's sister from Italy." And then somebody next to me said, "No, he asked you if your ancestors were from Italy, because you're using horses instead of tractors." So I experienced that. I remember on the bus once, my father was always looking for feed for the sheep, and some of the best feed were on the road. The side of the road, the grass was high, and so sometimes we'd herd the sheep on the road, but sometimes they'd get out. And I remember one day on the bus, getting on the bus and going along, and the sheep was running in front of us. Instead of going under the fence, get back in the pasture, they just ran in front of us, 2 or 3 head, for quite a while. And I remember somebody on the bus said, "I wonder why they can't fix their fences. Why don't they fix their fences?" I remember once, I don't know why the whole herd of sheep bedded down on the road just between our house and Margie and John's. And they spent then the whole night there, and then the next morning there was sheep manure all over the road. So the school bus come along, and I shipped through the manure to get on the school bus, and we started up, and the sheep manure would stick to the wheels, and it'd come up and it'd bounce up on the wheel wells, and oh, it made an awful sound, and all the kids were snickering and laughing. And I dreaded all day school, having to come back and go through that. And I remember my last period was seminary, but that was the most miserable school hour I'd ever had, thinking of, oh, I've got to go back, and that bus driving through that sheep manure, and it coming up and hitting, making that awful sound. But enough traffic had gone by, and it was dry enough that they didn't make that awful sound, so I was safe from that a little bit. That's some of the experiences. I can't.
Your dating experiences.
I can't remember that one. Well,
Or he doesn't want to when I'm here.
Maybe Audrey, if you would go in the other room, be more free and open.
His memory'd come back, wouldn't it?
The people's girl.
Well, what I remember of that doesn't fit with your narrative. I don't remember.
Make it fit. You can make it fit.
Well, I'll tell you what I can remember, and you fill in what I've told you before. I can never remember ever in high school asking, well, I do remember asking one girl on a date for the junior prom, but she had already been asked. So she told me no. But other than that, I never asked a girl on a date.
So you didn't go to junior prom?
I went for a few minutes alone without to see who was there, who got a date with who.
Who was going with the girl he wanted to go with?
Let's see. Quite often, well, not, more than once, a really nice, cute girl, the bishop's daughter in Lava, would call me and say, "Are you going to the ball game tonight?" And I said I had planned to, and she said, "Well, my mother's taking me, and we could stop by and pick you up." And I said, "Well, that would be good." So she would stop by and pick me up, and we'd go to the ball game or a dance after the ball game.
Was this Whitehead?
No,
No.
Teeples.
Teeples.
Oh,
Karen. Yeah. So I remember that, but that part doesn't fit in with the picture you were painting, does it?
What conflicts?
Oh, well, that was a positive, good thing that she was asking me instead of,
Well, but I thought it reflected on your situation.
oh, well,
Our situation.
okay, okay.
Well, tell us about your date with her.
I didn't go on a date with her. I went with her to the ball game or a dance
with her mother.
with her mother. Yeah.
She liked Doug. She liked him. And he liked her, I assume, I'm just assuming that, but our social situation was so dire, and pathetic, he didn't dare ask her. Is that incorrect or correct?
That's correct.
So is that Jim's problem too?
Not as much.
So did you ask girls on dates?
No,
Why?
no. I don't know.
Were you embarrassed as a kid in school about your family
A
situation?
little, but not too much, because I was well accepted, and I didn't. Nobody looked down on me that I could tell or give me any problem.
They didn't dare, he'd beat him up.
I wasn't scared of any kid in my class. I was the littlest kid in my class, but there wasn't anybody in there that bothered me any. But I felt like I was well accepted and treated good. I had good friends and it was good.
You notice he didn't say good teachers. He didn't say that, did he?
I do remember my ride from Idaho to BYU coming to register as a freshman. And the further away from Lava I got and the closer to Provo I got, kind of that heavy cloud that Ken's describing lifting, and me thinking, oh, I am glad to be driving away from Lava. I remember that feeling.
Would you have felt that way about Marion?
No, I would not have felt that about Marion.
Was that in looking back, was Marion where you should have remained, or was Idaho where it was destined to have gone? Was that the right move and choice?
I suppose so. I haven't had any feelings there. I suppose that the folks were doing what was good and right.
I think there were 3 reasons we left Marion. John had 2 boys older than Jim, and he and Paul were kind of thinking of being partners, and so they wanted a bigger ranch. That's one reason. Another reason, we had the first sprinkler system in northern Utah and the second one in the state of Utah. And it was run by a big diesel engine that guzzled diesel, and we irrigated out of a ditch on our canal with our turn, which came every 9 or 18 days, and we had it for like 18 hours, and you could not get over the ground with a sprinkler system. We tried, we would move it every hour and a half, 24 hours a day, and then we would trade water, and then we would extend it to 30. We had it for 36 hours, but you just couldn't irrigate the place with a sprinkler. Plus it was expensive, so they wanted to find a place that had a continuous stream of water that went with the place, and they wanted to have it so it could be run by gravity. So we looked in Montana and Nevada, Utah, Wyoming, yes, we went up to Wyoming. But the places that we found that would even work were more suited to cattle. than sheep, and that didn't apply to, suit Pa and John. I went with Pa and John and Mom and another fellow from Ogden that was looking for a place with a real estate agent from Brigham City whose name was Jepson. We were in his Pontiac car. So that was 6 of us. There were 6 of us in that car. And we went up into Montana, and we went up into around in the Bitterroot Valley. We found the most beautiful places, but they were suited for cattle and not sheep, and they didn't interest Pa and John. They're beautiful. You know, you know what the Bitterroot Valley of Montana was, and you could buy a place there then.
You guys wished you would have gone into cattle then, over sheep and gone there?
John would never have been happy with cattle. I don't know if Pa would have. I don't know what made Pa want sheep in the beginning versus his brothers who liked cattle. But it wouldn't. Okay, so the third reason that we needed to leave was we owned 600 acres, or maybe 640, a section where we were, and we had 400 or 500 sheep, and there was not a fence between us and the Forest Service. When the sheep would eat the lush feed on our place, they wanted to be up on the forest where the newer, fresher feed was, and we couldn't stop them. They would go at night. They would actually go at night and get up there, and the forest ranger would ride his horse up there from time to time, not regularly, but from time to time, and if he saw sheep manure on the forest, on the road, then he'd come to my father. And it was a constant inconvenience and a weight on my father that the sheep were either there or the Forest Service ranger would see them. And this shows you the great intellectual capacity of our bureaucracy. So he fined my father for having the sheep up there. And then it would have gotten worse if the fines would have been prohibitive if we continued. So one day the forest ranger said to my father, it's not so much the feed that they eat, but it's the erosion they cause. Now I don't know if you've been, you guys have all been, haven't you, in that country?
Yeah.
East of where our house, how thick the oak brush is, and then you get above that, and then there's aspens and pines. And the only water that comes out of that whole drainage was a little dinky spring that comes down into our reservoir. So he said, when he said it's the erosion they'll cause, and my father said, well, where is it going to erode to? Down into my reservoir? No, it'll blow away. That is an intelligence of the forest ranger. You never saw a handful of dust come out of that whole drainage, ever, unless the sheep were trailing on the road. And then you could look up and see the dust. So that was a constant pressure on my father to get out of that situation. He wanted a bigger place where they could run the sheep. So those three reasons were, in my opinion, are the reasons we left Utah.
I have something I remember. So when they almost lost the place, Pa went around to people to borrow money to make the payment so they didn't get foreclosed on. And I guess he had, a sister and a niece, Aunt Leon and
Doug
Pack.
Yeah.
Anyway, he said, and it was hard on him. It was really hard on him to have to go borrow money. But he said, we're told we should give to the poor. He said, I sure would rather give to them than be them.
And I'll tell you, a couple of, not his siblings, but a couple of siblings'
Children.
children or their spouses. It brought out their true character.
What did?
And
Borrowing money.
Oh.
borrowing, they lent him some money, but they
Oh.
needed it back now,
Oh,
and they didn't. They didn't.
oh.
I don't want to be there and see them account for that. I don't even want to see them go through the paying for that.
Because of what a wonderful family and your parents and your hard work, I would assume it wouldn't take long to turn that reputation around in Lava. I wouldn't think that a church or anywhere they look down on the family very long. Is that true? When they got to know you all and
John didn't help our reputation a lot because he would get hay and grain from people and not pay them back.
The experience Ken was feeling at church, I did not feel as much as he did. I felt it with my social community and people my age, but not so much at church. I didn't feel that.
But it kinda got turned around, he was bishop.
exactly.
Well, when
Eventually, right?
when I went back, I had a good job here at BYU. I was with the Animal Science Department, the Livestock Herdsman. I was getting a good salary. I had good tickets to all the sports events I wanted. I loved working with the professors that I worked with, their families, their wives. I just loved it. I liked the climate here. I liked the whole valley. They talk about being apple or what do they call this place?
A happy valley.
Yeah, but more than that.
Fruit basket or?
No, it made me
Oh.
happy, but after we've been married a little while, we realized that our children could not work with me because BYU couldn't do it because of liability. So if we wanted to be raised like we were raised, we had to go leave BYU, and that's why we left. So when I went back there with Colleen, I didn't care what they thought. I had Colleen. And when we got there, my feeling of the relationship between me and the ward members was just positive. Totally positive.
Is that when the dark cloud of Idaho and lava left you?
Well, it didn't come back to me. It had gone, but it never did come back.
So when you lived in the trailer, you felt as accepted as when you got in your nice house?
Well, I felt accepted in the trailer. I was a bishop when I lived in the trailer.
Okay, I didn't remember that.
Do you guys, was Jim's work ethic born? Were you born with it, Jim, or you have to get trained in it? And how do you have some of it rub off on the rest of us?
It's a good question. I think it's some of both.
I think he was born with it.
Circumstances.
We all worked. He certainly wasn't trained to park and let somebody else do the work, but he always worked.
Circumstances help determine your work ethic too. When there's no choice, you kind of do it.
Doug, when and if, do you still get any darkness or depression when you go up there, or when did that change for you?
A little bit. When I go from here to Lava, when I get into Cache Valley, it's bright and beautiful and wonderful, and I feel like the angels are watching over me. When I hit Marsh Valley, it closes in a little bit.
And that's for me too when I'm
When you're by the high school?
Yeah.
When I was in college, I went on a trip with the home ec department to National Home Ec Convention in Denver. And when I got back, we took a bus from Logan. And when we got back, I rode with a home ec teacher from Rick's College. She gave me a ride from Logan back to my place in Lava. And I said to her, the norther I go, the uglier it gets. That's the way I felt, leaving Logan, going to Lava. But my first experience, so Ken and I were students at BYU when the folks moved, and then Ken went up, and then Ken took me up. And so we got off of the highway and headed east, and then at the bridge we turned north. But they told me I didn't turn north. They told me I was still going east, and my directions were wrong from the get-go. So I didn't like that. And then we went to the town of Lava, and it was fall, and it was dark and cold and windy, and the streets were bare. It just looked abandoned, and I remember a paper or something blowing across the road, and then there was some poor old decrepit person hobbling along, I guess going to the hot baths. And
Milk
it
Paris.
just looked ugly to me. It was just,
Milk Paris on a peg leg.
it just looked ugly to me. And then, but I didn't spend much time in Lava at all. But every time, and this is an exaggeration, but it did feel to me like every single time I went there, the weather was cold and the wind was blowing, and I got earaches, and I hated it. And I'd say, ooh, this is rotten weather. And somebody in the family would say, oh, it's been just beautiful till you came. We must have beautiful. So I never liked Lava until then after I was married and had some kids, and then we went, and the cousins, my kids and Doug's kids and your kids played together, and then it changed. It was fun then because of family.
I want to quickly tell those of you who don't know how our water situation changed. So when I quit my job here and went up there, Jim and I got a loan and leased Roger Johnson's farm, which was down between the Steel Bridge and McCammon. And we leased it for a few years, and we got a loan for the equipment on it, and we were going along, and so Roger got an opportunity to sell it. No, I guess we bought the home place first. From John. That's a long story too. But his shysters had shystered him out of everything that he owned, and he lost the place, even the home place. And it was they had a sheriff's sale on it on the courthouse steps of the place we're on now. But the creditor, Federal Land Bank, bought it back for the amount that John owed on it. So then, but he still was in hock, but he had 1 year. The law says if you're foreclosed on, you have a year to get it back if you can come up with the money. So he sold it to two developers, one in Pocatello and one in Income, named Bull and
Hammond.
Okay. And so then we wanted the place, and so we had leased this Roger Johnson place and got some reputation with with the FHA then, the Farm Home Administration, and so we went to them to, and John said he would sell it to us. And he wrote us up a contract if we would come up with the money by a certain time. So we went to Federal Land Bank and applied for a loan, and they looked our situation over and they wanted references, and I didn't have very good references except from professors down here. But Jim, we leased a place while I was still here out in Hawkins Basin, and he worked his guts out on that place. He ate cornflakes 3 times a day because he was moving pipe and putting up hay and running that farm alone. And the neighbor was not dumb and noticed what he was doing. The guy that delivered fuel noticed what he was doing and wasn't dumb. So when he wrote for references for him, they gave him references as to what he could do and what he was doing. And that is what secured our loan to buy our place with. Well, yeah, to buy our place with. So.
And that wasn't cornflakes, it was Wheaties.
Yeah, why would I forget that? I knew that.
What did he say?
It wasn't
I said
cornflakes, it was
Wheaties.
Wheaties.
The only time that changed is when Mom would go out, take him some food. Okay, so in the meantime, John sold the place to this Boland Hammond. And he said to them when he sold it, he said, now I've given my brothers an option on this place if they come up with the money by a certain date. And his rinky-dink pin-headed lawyer in Pocatello said, your brothers don't have any money. They're not gonna come up with that money. Go ahead and sell it. And he said, nevertheless, I've given them an option and I've signed my name to it. If they come up with the money, I got to sell it to them. So by golly, the loan came through before our option was out. But the money was not there. But the loan was approved, but the money was not there. We didn't know when it'd be there. So there was a bishop in Downey that was a bishop at the same time as me, and he was the manager of the bank in Downey, Ireland Bank. So I went to him and I said, his name was Morgan Evans. He also had a ranch, but he was manager of the bank. Got his degree here at BYU. I said, I need some help. He said, what do you need? And I told him the situation. I said, could we borrow the place cost $250,000, $125 for Jim and $125 for me. I said, could we borrow $250,000 until our money comes from FHA? And he said, well, let me look into it. So he checked and made sure that the loan was approved and the money would be there. And he said, okay, I'll lend it to you. So the time was running out. So I went, on the last day of our option, he said, come over to the bank and you'll get the papers and the money. So I went over to the bank and they were not quite through typing up the approval, the loan, the temporary loan to us. He had everybody in that bank typing as fast as they could type. And when he got through, he says, here you are.
Oh.
We got in Ma and Pa's car, because our Volkswagen didn't hold us all. There was John and Margie, me, Colleen, and Jim. And we had just barely enough time to get to the title company in Pocatello before it was too late. So I said in the car, what if we have a flat tire? It'll make us too late and we're lost. And John said, we're not gonna have a flat tire. So we got there about 10 minutes before closing time, and the title company owner or manager was out on the sidewalk, and he said, get out of your car, park it right there and get in here. We went right in and signed the papers, and the guy, one of the two guys that John had sold it to, was standing there. And he didn't act ignorant, he didn't act rotten with us, but I could tell he was very disappointed. because we had seen, before this date, we had seen 2 cars or a pickup and a car come onto the place, and we thought they were looking it over to see about its development possibilities. They had promised, John says, I want you to promise me you won't develop it, but they would have. I'm certain they would have. I don't know that, but I'm certain they would have. Okay, so we signed the papers in the title company, all of us, and they had to be filed in the courthouse before closing time. And I said to the title company, I said, how are we gonna get across the road and get these filed? And he said, we have ways. He never did say what they were, but he said, we have ways. So we ended up with a place. So when we're in the process of signing the papers for the loan with the FHA, we were in there and we had a 40-year loan to pay back this $250,000. And I said to the girl, and I said, what if the millennium comes before this is paid off? And she says, I don't think that the millennium coming is gonna have one bit of influence on your requirement to pay this money back. She wasn't snotty, but she was very
She didn't see the humor in it at all.
So I can't remember right now the timeline of everything, but this place we were leasing of Roger Johnson's, before we bought, I don't know, I can't remember.
We still run that 2 years after we got the Monroe place.
Yes, okay.
I'd
So,
like to hear her Sunday school version of the millennium.
so, we were in the process of buying part of Roger's place, cause he had more water than he needed on the place, so we were gonna buy everything south of the railroad tracks, and then he would transfer the water on it to us, and we could get a point of diversion and move it up to our place in Lava. You could get a point of diversion transfer. Okay, we went to the bank, they lent us the money, we had it all ready to buy it, and then we'd have some water. So we got a phone call from Roger Johnson. He says, I've got an opportunity to sell this place, all of it together. He said, I'm gonna do it. And he said, I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't say much to these people until the deal is done. So he sold it to a woman, a widow woman, who ran a dairy in Kansas City with her brother, with their brother. Okay, so the widow's husband had died, and the brother and his family moved out away from Kansas City. Development encroached in, see, so they sold it for good money. So the brother, he went somewhere and dairied somewhere else and processed his own milk. She came out and saw this farm for sale, and she had a delinquent adult son who had kids, who was on drugs, and she wanted a farm to see if it would help rehabilitate him. And she had another son that was not interested. Okay, so here she was. She didn't know anything about irrigation. So she bought Roger's place, and like Jim said, we still had a 2-year lease on the place. And so we ran the place, at least on part of the place. I think we just, at the end, we just ran the crop we had planted of grain above the canal. So we saw them try to run this place, and we were going back and forth every day. And the minute the people in the community and Roger Johnson knew the situation, this woman had some money, they started taking advantage of her. Roger now wouldn't let him go through his yard. He made him build a new road down across another bridge down lower, but it was on the place, and go around the place, and she put thousands of dollars into building that road because it run through a swamp. And they didn't know how to irrigate, but they hired a guy from Texas to manage the place for them. He knew nothing about farming, and he got a girlfriend that had come from the east to go to school at Idaho State to learn how to manage wolves. Yeah, that was his girlfriend. So Jim and I'd go through there every day, and they weren't they could flood irrigate this pasture. They bought some cows, maybe. So we said, why don't you irrigate this pasture? Well, we're not used to irrigation. Why? I said, let me show you how to irrigate this pasture. You've got the water, do it. So we helped them do that and other things, and we got quite friendly with them. And so we went to the mother who lived in McCammon, built a nice house in McCammon. We said, would you sell us some water? We think that you have more water on your place here that you bought than you need. And she says, I don't know. We're the only people that I know of that didn't try to take advantage of them, and did. Big time. Big time. They got they got thousands and thousands of dollars from that woman by crooked deals. So she said, I will go check with the Department of Water Resources and see what they say. So she did, and she got back to it. She says, I think I could sell you some water. So we wrote up an agreement, gave her some money down, and in the meantime, the neighbors, some of them, including Roger Johnson, said no. He says, I hold the mortgage on that place, and no water's being sold off from it. You're not selling water off that place. So he kiboshed the deal. But then he sold his mortgage to somebody, some mortgage holder type of an outfit, and they knew nothing about farming. They just bought it for an investment. So she lost the place. Her druggy son just made bad decisions, and she lost it. And so when they were foreclosing on her, the people who were foreclosing, she said to them, I have one request. She said, I have made an agreement with the Anderson brothers that I would sell them some water, and they've already given me a down payment on the water. I would like to be able to consummate that deal with them. And they said, we see no harm in that. So she got permission from them for us to buy the water. Of course, the money went to them and not her, but we paid off the rest of it, and we transferred the water up to our place. And it's the priority date is 1868. Indian water. Indian water. Nobody can take it. Nobody.
It's the highest, it's the best decree on the Portneuf River.
Now, it wasn't as much as we needed to use all of the creek, but when we take the amount that we got, that Indian water, then it takes enough out of the creek that the rest usually sinks in the ground. And that's a futile call. So when they make a call on our water, they can't take all of it, and we turn the rest down, sinks in the ground, futile call. So the law says a futile call, if it doesn't benefit the guy who's making the call, it's yours. So we use that.
So when did you get that water right? What's the year?
No.
In the 90s, wasn't it, Vinny?
Well, that's when re-adjudication. Yeah, I guess when it became final is in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Or later.
So you had a lot of crooked neighbors that took advantage of her?
Well, they weren't all neighbors. The
road
builder, the machinery
they just saw
dealer,
money.
the seed
They just
dealer,
saw
the
dollar signs.
well driller,
Just saw dollar signs.
Okay.
What became of her?
Did she die when she lived in
I
that
think
house,
so.
or did she move?
I think, well, she may have lost that house. Did she lose her house there?
She could have. could have lost that new house.
She was honest with us, so.
And her son, this drug addict son, he died. He died really young.
Well, it's
Yeah.
sure fortunate you guys built some trust with her.
Well, that did it. Sean, that did it. That was what did it. But from the very beginning, when our family went up and looked at that place, the Lord's hand has been in it. It's been the Lord's hand in it continually, clear along.
Even if the sheep manure is on the road edge.
Taught me humility.
Yeah.
And so what's the millennial purpose of your ranch? And how far off is that?
You mean
The,
how far
the
away?
millennium,
Yeah.
I don't think I'll see it come. In fact, I'm almost positive.
You don't think you will?
No way.
You're like my brother Joseph and think we got 2090
I don't know
at
a date.
least?
I don't know a date, but people say the United States is getting so crooked and corrupt, and the government is so corrupt that how can we keep going on? And they say, well, we're worse than Sodom and Gomorrah now, but I don't think, I think we're gonna see worse times ahead of us before the end comes.
I think it's pretty wicked, but the Lord is trying to save as many people, good people, as He can. Missionary work is really going on, and there's a lot of people joining the church, and I think that's really important, and that probably is keeping it from the Savior coming till He can get all the sheep from the goats sorted out.
It's good missionaries.
You want extra cushions?
No.
All right.
No, I don't.
Is that good for now?
I don't want it.
Anyone else have anything?
Thank you all. Thank you, Tim, for recording it. Thanks for
Ruth has
participation.
something.
Unless you don't want him now, I'd like to hear about Grandma Watson or those few other memories you guys mentioned you did have of your grandparents, including the story of Kim on Christmas.
You want that recorded?
I'll start out with a brief, I knew Grandma Watson a little bit, but the thing that I remember that sticks in my mind, her maiden name was Duke, and my father said she thinks she is royalty. She acts like she thinks she's royalty. The Duke name fits her well.
Sometimes he called her Alice Blue Blood.
She was a Democrat. She sat in our home in Marion, and Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the President of the United States, and you know he's the one that got the New Deal going, and all this government handouts traced back to his example getting us out of the Depression. And she said, and then he would talk to the public quite often. They call them fireside chats. Sometimes once a week he would talk to the public, and you know he had polio and he couldn't stand up, so he'd sit in a chair and the desk. And Grandma Watson said, "Oh, I love to hear President Roosevelt talk. It just sends chills up my spine, just like the general authorities talking in general conference. I just love it." And Pa was in the same room over by the sink in the kitchen, and I could tell he was just cringing because he hated socialism.
Sent tingles up his back too, huh?
No, his went down. So one of you guys tell about Kim and his bow and arrow. You were all there, weren't we? You were there.
I was
You
there.
were all-
Jim,
okay.
Jim should. He should tell it. Jim, he's
Yeah,
your
you
friend.
tell us.
Well, it was on Christmas. It was Christmas Day, and Grandma and Grandpa Watson come out to have Christmas dinner with us. And Kim had got a bow and arrow for Christmas. And the adults were all sitting up to the table, and Kim was in the living room.
Tell them the kind of bow and arrow, what the arrows were.
Well, it was a target arrow. It was an arrow with the suction that you shoot a target and it hits the target and sticks to it. And he was in the living room and he
How old was he?
He was not very old, just big enough to shoot a bow and arrow.
Probably 4 or 5.
Five,
Probably.
4 to 6.
We were all sitting at the kitchen table except the little kids who'd eaten and gone in, some in the living room by the Christmas tree.
And so Herman, he shot his arrow and it hit Grandma on the back of the neck and she let out a blood-curdling cry.
You'd have thought she'd been shot.
It was just like she'd been shot with a real arrow. And Pa was there at the table and he started laughing. And then he looked at Grandpa Watson and he realized he better not be laughing. And I can remember Kim, he felt just like he had shot her and killed her with a real arrow. Oh, he didn't know what to do.
His eyes got that big.
There was no place for him to hide, and he didn't know what to do.
Did your dad curtail his laughter
Yes.
quick
Yes.
enough that she
You
didn't
bet.
notice it?
Yeah, I don't know, but I don't know.
Okay.
He quit laughing. So I can tell you this experience about Grandma Watson. So when, after we got up there and the folks were forced to live in the Jackson house because of financial means, and we'd come down here to visit her, and Paul wouldn't be present. She said, "Oh, that Ivan. I'm so mad at Ivan dragging Susie off up there to Pioneer up there, that house, no plumbing in it, up in that Pioneer up there. I'm so mad at Ivan, I don't know what to do." So they kept prevailing on Grandma to come up and visit them. And finally, one beautiful fall, just a perfect weather, Grandma came up. She agreed if they'd bring her up, she'd visit for.
And I think
2 or
she
3
had to,
days.
didn't Laura and Sterling, they had a convention or something they had to go to and they needed some place for Grandma to go.
I think that's correct.
I don't think she came willingly.
So Mom, she scurried around and cleaned the place up as really, really well, really nice. And to accommodate Grandma, we had a couch in the living room, and it would pull out into a bed, and she put the nice bedding on that bed, and so she didn't have to go outside at night to the outhouse. She had a chair and fixed so that with a chamber pot under it, so Grandma could use that, and then Mom would get up early in the morning, and take care of it. One of the drawbacks was they were fixing the highway, so all the traffic was diverted around our road. So semis would come there and they'd come past that house, and Grandma was afraid it was gonna hit the corner of the house. She was literally very uncomfortable about those trucks. She was afraid they were gonna hit it. So we were all asleep one night, and well, I guess before this. So about the second day she was there, and the weather was beautiful. Indian summer, just beautiful weather. So Pa came in for breakfast, and Grandma was up, and Pa said, "Good morning, Grandma. you do like Idaho, don't you? And she said, oh, like hell. So a day or two after that, might have been the same day, I don't know, we were all in bed and we heard this, oh, 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 oh. Mom jumped out of bed, oh, 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 oh. Running down the stairs, and Grandma had fallen off the chair.
How old would she have been, would you think?
In her 80s.
Oh.
She still had a really bright mind, and she could get around some, you know. So, me and Doug, I think it was a deer season, but the weather was still really Indian summer. We went over above Laverell Johnson's and hunting deer one morning.
No, it was over above Crumbs.
You sure? Was it you with me then?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, okay. So we were over there and we missed breakfast. So we came back after breakfast and the only person in the house was Grandma. And then we hadn't had breakfast, so we proceeded to fix ourselves some breakfast, and she came in the kitchen where we were and she talked to us. I had never up to that point seen Grandma in such a down-to-earth, positive, pleasant, happy-like mood as she talked with me and Jim while we were eating breakfast. She talked about when she was younger, her family hunted deer and things like that. She was happy. She was just happy.
What do you attribute that to?
Being the weather for one thing,
Oh,
and
Jerry,
being in Idaho on the ranch, Sean. Being in the Jackson house.
Thanks, Doug.
You, and so her maiden name, her parents were who?
Duke. James Alfred Duke.
Was her father. And her mother then? Who was his,
She was, okay.
Who was?
She was a gardener. She married a Duke.
Okay, so Duke and Gardner, and then she was, okay.
Married lots.
That's right.
Okay.
Paulina, I'm ready to go.
Yes,
All right, thanks everyone.
gotta go.
We'll be there before dark.